cold reckoning. Presence. He filed the report on a Thursday. It was classified on a Friday. On Saturday, he realized he had emailed it to his personal account by accident 2 weeks earlier. It was the most important accident of his life. The office smelled like cold coffee and printer paper. It was an ordinary Thursday, the kind that doesn't show up in any history book. Elliot Nash opened the internal system, attached the document he'd spent 3 weeks finishing, and clicked send. He had no idea he was holding the most explosive proof of the last decade. He just wanted to go home. Nash worked at a federal health intelligence unit, a department most people don't even know exists. His job was to monitor disease clusters around the world and identify early signals of outbreaks before they became diplomatic problems or public health crises. It wasn't glamorous. It was spreadsheets, satellite reports, and mortality pattern analysis in regions where data arrived late, distorted, or didn't arrive at all. In 2019, his routine surveillance system flagged something unusual. A cluster of respiratory cases in a region of Southeast Asia. Nothing that would catch the eye of someone who didn't know what they were looking for. But Nash knew. And the problem wasn't what the data showed. It was what the data was hiding. Nash spent weeks cross-referencing hospital infrastructure data, cremation rates, government antiviral purchases, and school absence reports in the region. What he found was deeply unsettling. For every case officially reported, between 8 and 15 real cases were happening in silence. That meant, while the world saw a handful of records, there were hundreds, possibly thousands, of sick people in a region that barely had the infrastructure to report deaths, let alone infections. He formalized the recommendation, Category 3 Pandemic Preparedness Alert, the level that would automatically trigger resource prepositioning, strategic stockpile activation, and international notification protocols. This was exactly what the system was built for, exactly what he had been trained to do. He followed the protocol. And the protocol betrayed him. The document was submitted through the correct channels on Thursday. By Friday morning, it had received maximum security classification. The official justification, diplomatic sensitivity. Diplomatic sensitivity. 2 words that in bureaucratic language mean, this will cause problems with a foreign government if it leaks. Not necessarily that it's wrong. Not necessarily that it isn't urgent. Just inconvenient. The pandemic preparedness alert was quietly archived. Not rejected, not answered. Archived. Nash learned about the classification through an automatic internal email. No additional explanation. No appeals process, no name attached to the decision. He closed his computer, went home, and completely forgot that 2 weeks earlier he had sent a working draft to himself. It was the early hours of Saturday when Nash, unable to sleep, opened his personal inbox for the first time in weeks. Between unread newsletters and streaming notifications, there it was. Subject line, draft, edit later, sent by himself, with the document attached. The file contained 94% of the final report, raw data, methodology, dispersion projections, the Category 3 recommendation. Everything. Sent to a personal account, outside the federal system, outside the jurisdiction of the classification order. He was holding what the government had tried to bury, and he had done nothing illegal to get it. He read the entire document that night, not because he'd forgotten the content, he knew it by heart, but because he needed to understand what that file represented now. Nash spent the next 3 days without telling anyone about the file. He kept going to work, kept submitting his weekly reports, kept drinking cold coffee in the same office. Inside, he was calculating. Not impulsively. Nash was an analyst. He analyzed risk for a living. And the risk here was enormous in both directions. Disclosing without legal structure could destroy his career, his clearance, his freedom. Not disclosing could destroy something far larger. The world still didn't know what was coming, but Nash knew. And Nash had proof that the government knew too. He opened a new document on his personal computer and started writing a list of attorneys specializing in national security law. 14 months after the report was archived, the pandemic began. The world watched in real time as the exact scenario Nash had described unfolded. A novel respiratory pathogen, accelerated dispersal, overwhelmed health systems, delayed responses. Every news broadcast was a page from his classified report. Every death toll was a consequence of the decision to archive that alert. Nash watched all of it, with 3 national security attorneys at his side, working in silence to build the precise legal framework that would allow disclosure of the email without violating his security clearance. 11 months of work, every comma legally defensible. He didn't leak to journalists. He didn't post anonymously. He did the exact opposite of what a movie character would do. And that's what worked. If you're watching this and you don't follow Cold Reckoning yet, this is the moment. Stories like this exist because someone goes looking for them. Follow the channel. Be part of that. The legal strategy Nash and his attorneys developed was elegant in its brutality. Instead of voluntarily disclosing the file and risking a classification violation, they built the conditions for a congressional subcommittee to issue a formal subpoena requesting exactly that document. Nash didn't speak publicly, didn't give interviews. But behind the scenes, he quietly fed a specific set of investigators with questions that inevitably led back to the 2019 report. What was the classification protocol for epidemiological alerts? What criteria justified archiving on grounds of diplomatic sensitivity? Who had the authority to cancel a Category 3 alert? Every question was a step. Every institutional answer was another step. And when the subpoena arrived, the email was already with the attorneys, documented, authenticated, and legally shielded. When the email was finally delivered to the subcommittee, there was nothing dramatic about the scene. No press conference, no cinematic moment. An envelope, a documented chain of custody, a closed session. The document showed, with precision of dates, data, and methodology, that the federal government had been warned 14 months before the pandemic began, had received a formal preparedness recommendation, and had chosen to archive it for diplomatic reasons. Nash was never charged. His security clearance was not revoked. The attorneys had closed every gap. The congressional subpoena protected the disclosure. The personal email, sent before the classification order, had never been under seal. The officials who classified the original report have never been publicly named. Proceedings ongoing, documents still sealed. He printed the email, framed it, hung it on the wall of his office. It's not a trophy, at least not in the way it looks. It's a reminder, the kind that hurts every time you look at it, that the system designed to protect people chose to protect diplomatic relationships instead. That someone made that choice consciously. That we will never know that person's name. Nash is still working, still submitting reports, still drinking cold coffee. Below the framed email in small text he chose himself, it reads, "Sent by accident, received by purpose." There is one question Nash refuses to answer in interviews. Not about the report, not about the classification, about the email. The question is, was it really an accident? He smiles and changes the subject. Some documents changed the world. This one did, because no one believed. It still existed,